everyone! We are now live! So this is an Elegance of Living taster, and it is with one of my fabulous friends, Christopher Hughes, and he's here to talk to us today about what's your jewelry worth. I don't know if you've ever wondered what you've inherited from your grandmother or what you've seen in a store and thought, that's nice, but I wouldn't know what it is. So Chris has been an amazing mentor to me and to a lot of people about finding out this stuff. So without further ado, Christopher Hughes, welcome.
Well, good morning. Thank you for that warm welcome, Rebecca, and welcome to all the people that are joining us here from all over. I know we've got people from Korea and New Zealand and Hungary and England and America, and here I am in Brisbane, Australia. And I'm delighted to offer you this call again as a free gift. It was prompted by a conversation that I was having with a friend the other day, and I said to her, so if you had millions of dollars and you could go and buy whatever diamonds, whatever jewelry you wanted, would you know what you're buying? And it kind of hit her of like, oh, you know what, I actually really wouldn't. I'd have no idea if what I was buying was worth it or not worth it or anything like that. So I thought, well, let's have a little look at this and have a conversation and give people a few more tools. Partially, I'd like to share with everybody today how the industry evaluation works. And there's a few examples I'd like to give about how the industry works in America and also in Australia, just to give you two sort of different frames of reference. Unfortunately, I can't comment on the regulations in Europe or in Asia or some of those other specific countries, but afterwards, if you're interested in those, I can help you find out what the rules actually are. So, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get too far into it. I know that there is a can people ask questions in chat today, Rebecca and Michelle?
They can.
They
okay,
can.
cool.
And I've put a little note in the chat room for you to comment on and feed us through your questions, and we'll read those out to Chris.
Awesome. You guys will read them good, because I was wondering, where do I click for that? I'm cute, but not necessarily the brightest when it comes to technology. So, for those of you, I'm assuming everyone reads my blog
Does everyone know where to find your blog, those that don't?
Well, it's actually part of the journal of theantiqueguild.com.au, and I've got a series there that I've written on sporadically called The Elegance of Living, and in one of the most recent ones, I wrote about the idea of value and the idea of price. And what strikes me is most people have married those two concepts and assume that price and value are the same thing. And in a matter of fact, they're not. Or they assume as well that if they bought a diamond ring for $5,000, but the value of it is $10,000, suddenly they've made $5,000. Again, this is a misconception and a misnomer. That isn't necessarily how valuation works. Okay, so I'll ask everyone the question, and I'll ask you ladies here with me on this chat. What is value?
Well, I learned in the in the Elegance of Living Series 1 that value is in the eye of the beholder.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. I mean, I like to strip this down and unpack it at its most base level and look at value, because value really is a perception of judgment. I mean, I look at, say, it's a silly example, but I look at my cat and say, okay, to my cat, what's valuable? And I know you're all thinking, why are we talking about cats? I signed up to talk about jewelry. But if you look at it, to him, what's valuable is having a safe, secure, quiet, dark place to sleep, getting way more food than we think he ought to have. And, you know, those are the things that he has value. Of course, as people, we're a lot more complex creatures, and we have gone beyond the sort of bare necessities, if you want to look at it, say like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we've attached greater value on certain things that have come, say, from the earth and the planet. Gold, diamonds, all of these things we have made into commodities and attached value to. Right? I know this may seem all very simple, but I like to unpack these concepts at sort of their starting level and see how we can extrapolate from there. So value essentially is a human judgment on what something's worth. I mean, any old pawnbroker or jeweler will tell you the value of something is what someone will pay for it. In a nutshell. But
and that's exactly what Jennifer's just said in the chat as well. So that's great.
I mean, that is the old sort of nutshell or a cliche of trite but true sentiment that everyone will tell you. I mean, what's interesting is, again, we're getting to jewelry in a minute, but recently I went to Value, or not even Value, but Catalog, and start learning about a collection of African art that Gary Douglas purchased. And you look at this stuff, and there's no precious material. There's no gold or diamonds. There are things caked with mud and sacrificial blood and sticks and stones. And we determined that one of these pieces could be worth upwards of $2 million. So why is it worth that much? Where does this idea of value come in? It's totally a judgment, and it's based on what is valuable in the market. So in looking and taking that and looking at jewelry, when we go and value a piece of jewelry, like, again, I'll use this ring as an example, you present this to a jeweler or a valuer, who then asks a whole bunch of questions and looks at it and looks at the market and comes up with a figure based on that sort of calculation in their head. Now, is that necessarily the value of the item? No. That's their opinion of the value of the item. So when I first started doing exploring, sort of working in this industry with jewelry and antiques, I took one piece of jewelry to the top 4 valuers in town, and I took it to one person in Melbourne, in another city, and I got 5 wildly different assertions of the piece's value. Most of them all agreed on the composition of the piece, or what we talk about as the bricks and mortar. So they gave the same attribution to the gold and to the number of diamonds and their quality, but all their calculations on what the thing was worth was wildly different. So that's something you have to realize as you go into this. What something's worth and what something's priced at, A, as we've said, are different, and B, the price and the valuation are based on the valuer's or the retailer's judgment of the thing, for the most part. I mean, there are other factors in there as well. The retailer obviously they've got a store to run, they've got staff to pay, they've got taxes to pay, they've got lights to keep on, they've got, these sorts of things. So they have their margins all built in. And commercial jewelers like, say, Tiffany, have that down to a fine science. I think you'd probably find that the hard costs for a jeweler like Tiffany is about 20% of what it retails for.
Right.
But in that case, you're paying for the experience. You're paying for the prestige of going to that particular retailer, and the idea, real or not, that their diamonds are better than anybody else's. And they've worked very hard to create that sort of mystique for people. So that's the first thing that I want everyone to take out of this morning is the knowledge that all of this is based on a construct. And it isn't bound in anything true or real necessarily. It's all, I mean, at its base level, gold is it has a tradable price, and you could melt something and get that for it. That's as concrete as you can ever really get with jewelry. But then you also have to factor in the fact that someone's designed it. Someone has gone to the trouble of actually physically making it. You know, there's labor involved, and often quite specialized labor. So all of these things add into this computation of what the thing's worth. Now, just bear with me one moment. I'm going to share my screen with you after a little bit, but I've just got some notes here to talk to you about. Okay, so I touched on the idea that with the valuations, I took it all to these different people, and that's also important to know, is understanding the points of view of the different jewelers and different valuers, okay? And it's like me if I'm getting a little esoteric here, if people are getting lost. You can always stop me and ask more questions. I'll give you an example of how this works for me in Brisbane. Recently, we had come across a few strands of natural pearls in London. And natural pearls are extraordinarily rare. For those of you who weren't on the first series, natural pearls are a species of pearl from oysters that is essentially extinct. It doesn't really occur in nature so much anymore, especially the sort of perfect round ones. So finding a strand of naturals, it's incredibly rare, and they're very, very valuable. Now, the valuer that I use most often thinks this is ridiculous. And he doesn't understand why these should be worth so much more. His particular judgment is, that's stupid. So I can give him a strand of natural pearls, and he'll put a value on them of something like $7,000 or $8,000. Now I took these same pearls to another valuer who said, well, I can't base this on what's available in Brisbane. So she started looking at the world market, and she looked at what they're going for in London, what they're going for in Paris, what they're going for in New York. And she said, based on the last 2 years of sales results, I have to put a value on these of $50,000. Now again, I can feel everyone go in their head to, oh, then they must cost $50,000. No, value and price are not the same thing. So everywhere we've bought that and married those two concepts, can we destroy and uncreate all that?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. For those of you who've never done any Access Consciousness class, what I've just in there is the clearing statement, and I believe you can go to theclearingstatement.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
And find out more information about how that crazy talk works. Just know that it works, and if you want to know more, you can go find out. If not, that's fine too. Just let me talk. So anyway, as I was saying, if I give one piece to Callum, he may dislike it. If I give a piece to Kim, my other valuer, I'm just explaining this scenario so you see how it sort of works. Having worked with these two valuers over the years, I know that Callum doesn't like natural pearls. I also know that Kim doesn't like opals. Do I send my opals to her? No. I send them to Callum because he actually sees the beauty of them and enjoys them. The object here is not to send them to a valuer that'll put a sky-high price and valuation on it, because that actually doesn't do anyone any favors either. That creates a whole lot of grief and drama. The idea is to bring it to someone who can actually appreciate it. And knowing what their judgments are, you can strategically work with the one that's going to give you the best outcome on that piece. And again, the best outcome is not necessarily the highest valuation. Because people know as well, if you're sitting with an item in your shop and you've got $50,000 on it and it just feels weird, they know that the price is not really accurate or correct for that item. And some people might just want to pay that.
Right. So, Chris, could you talk about creating a relationship with your valuers and how to get into their head a little to look at those judgments?
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, for me, it's been based on getting to know them. Like it wasn't sort of necessarily an immediate thing, but
right.
If you sit down with them and you show them a piece, And you know straight away by their reaction to it or their body language or whatever, if they go, or, oh yeah, I've seen lots of those. Or rather, if they go, oh, that's interesting, and they start to actually show an interest in it and turn it over and look at it and admire some of the work in it.
Right.
Again, Rebecca, to use the example of, say, Kim and Callum, Callum is an operating jewelry manufacturer. So he knows, say, if you're buying you can buy pre-manufactured settings for rings that you just whack a diamond or a stone in and off you go. He knows what it costs to get that versus what it costs to hand make a new one versus X, Y, and Z. And he has an appreciation of that, and I know that because he's a jeweler. Kim, on the other hand, makes no jewelry. She's a professional valuer, and that's all she does. And I've noticed that she doesn't have the same appreciation or understanding of what goes into actually constructing a piece because she doesn't have that first-hand knowledge.
Right.
So, again, this is sort of an extrapolatory exercise, but it's all based on knowing where they're at and what their judgments are. Say, for example, to take that further, if you were in, say, small-town New Zealand or small-town Australia and you went to see a jewelry valuer there, their perception of the market might be based on their small town and not a bigger picture of the world. Or even just, that small town New Zealand versus small town, or not small town, but, well, it is small town Auckland, but Auckland versus small town New Zealand, they will have a totally different perception and understanding. Just know that going in. And ask a few questions, and trust that you actually do know a whole lot more than you realize. If something feels wonky, and it feels like you're being sold fish oil, just go with what you know. It's not about keeping barriers up and keeping everyone at arm's length, but just being sort of interesting point of view about it all and in allowance of everybody else, and going with what's light and what's true for you. Now, the tricky thing is, first of all, here's another piece of advice I'd like to give everyone with regard to jewelry valuation. My personal preference is I don't like to deal with people that offer their own valuations. Say, for example, here I am, Chris Antique Dealer, and I've got this glass to sell, and I say it's worth $400, and here's my valuation. My personal preference is to go with somebody who's offering you a valuation that's a third party. If they're not vested in it themselves, they're professional valuers, and that's what they do. Now, the trick here is, for all of my friends tuning in from the United States, in the United States, you are not required to have any qualifications or credentials to offer an appraisal.
Wow.
All you need is letterhead, and you can offer a valuation. So be aware of that.
So that's not just those that are in the US that need to be aware of that. If you're buying from the US, you need to be aware of that as well.
Absolutely. If you're buying from the US, good point. And what you'll often find in other countries like Australia and New Zealand is that people will give you a certificate of authenticity. And look at that. What does certificate of authenticity really mean? That means I certify that this is real. That is not a testament to value whatsoever. And valuation, the purpose of valuation more often than not is to inform your insurance company of what something is worth. And again, insurance companies prefer a third party. Insurance companies most often will also accept a receipt from the retailer stating what you paid for the item. Again, one of the examples that I gave in the Elegance of Living blog that I wrote was about a pair of chairs in Melbourne that sold, and the auction house's valuation on the chairs was $12,000 to $18,000. Well, they sold for $156,000. So what are they worth? if you take those pieces to a valuer of furniture, he's probably not going to come out with $156,000. But if you bought them, you probably want to insure them for that. And your receipt, more often than not, will be accepted by the insurer as proof of what was paid, and they'll insure for that value.
So,
now,
Chris,
yeah,
can you explain? Patricia's asking, is a valuation and an appraisal the same thing?
Not always, no. So to answer Patricia's question, and I was just getting to, like I say, in the US, you don't need any kind of license. The other thing you need to know is there are 4 or 5 different levels of valuation. And you need to stipulate what level of valuation you would like. So appraisal, again, if you look at the meaning of the word appraisal, it doesn't actually have the same meaning as to value. Appraising really is having a look at the piece and giving you a breakdown of the contents of it. And generally at the bottom, they will put in what the value of the item is, like an estimated retail. But again, there's that word estimate. We're going to look at evaluation in a minute, but if you look at the language on them, they cover their backsides like you wouldn't believe to make no straightforward claims. So, but as I was answering Patricia's question, there's these levels of value. And the first level is what's called fair market. And this fair market value idea sort of speaks to what Jennifer Tooten said earlier, whereby something's worth what you'll pay for it. What fair market value is the bare bones of, if you took a ring and melted it, what's the gold worth, what's the stone worth from a wholesale point of view. That's fair market value. It's what a pawnbroker would give you for an item. And it's that absolute bottom of the market. The next one up is retail replacement. And that's a value we're giving their estimation of what something would be worth if you went to a retail store to replace it. And obviously, that'll be different for an item that is available commercially at retail right now, like if you were buying from a jeweler like Tiffany or David Yurman or one of those jewelers, versus if it was in a estate piece of jewelry. Now, with estate jewelry and antiques, generally speaking, the values can be a little bit higher because you can't just go out and replace it. It's often not that easy to go and find the exact ring again. However, there's usually a different relationship in dealing with antique and estate jewelry. There's usually a different relationship between price and value. There's often a slightly bigger gap. If you're looking at a new piece of jewelry, you can quite often be paying what the valuation says, absolute top dollar. And I'll give you a little insider secret. In new jewelry, the markup between what the stuff is made for and what it sells at is usually over 300%. And how does it get any better than that? There's a funny, I bring things like that up for people because I can feel everyone go, oh, why are they making that much money? Why shouldn't they? Everywhere that we've disallowed anyone else to make a profit, can we destroy and create all that?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all 9 shorts, boys and beyonds. What if it wasn't wrong to make a profit? Maybe if you allowed everyone else to, you'd allow yourself to as well. Just saying. So that's that. There's fair market, there's retail replacement, and as I said, retail replacement tends to be different between estate jewelry and brand new jewelry. The third basic level, or most common level, is insurance value. And here in Australia, and I believe in New Zealand, there's a little bit of commonality between retail replacement and insurance value. But in the US, generally, you insure something higher than retail, which is, again, higher than fair market value. So those 3 levels are important to understand. Now, it can get more complex than that when it comes to valuing, because oftentimes things need to be valued for, say, deceased estate, or for divorce, that sort of thing. Those values are even higher again because the purpose of them is to divide assets amongst people and create an equitable share. It's not as though it's reflective of price at all. So again, we have this departure from value and price, very different things. One other one you'll occasionally see is forced sale. A valuation based on forced sale is like if you had to sell it no matter what the conditions or the market for it were and get anything you can for it, this is the value of it. And forced sale is even below fair market value. Again, I give you this information so that you have tools when you're going out and reading a valuation and know what things really are worth. How are we going? Have we got any questions coming in?
We have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we do have a lot of questions.
People are getting really excited about this conversation. So,
cool.
Pat asked, when do you get a piece insured?
Well, it's really a personal preference. One thing you may need to know is that insurance is relatively expensive for jewelry. So have a look around and see. Sometimes you can have the item listed on your home and contents insurance. But when you do that, have a look at your policy and find out where the item needs to be kept in order for it to be insured. Like if you had your jewelry box just sitting on your vanity and you had a burglary and they just took it out of the box, that may not be insured. It may only be insured under house and contents if it's well and truly locked up and safe. Like say, for example, under my store insurance policy, and again, I know we start looking at things like insurance and you go, wow, that's boring.
It's funny you say that, but everybody's asking about insurance.
Cool. Because being willing to look at this information and actually dig through your policy and know what's going on makes a huge difference. Say, for example, in my store, if I have an item in a cabinet and the cabinet door is closed, it doesn't matter if it's locked or not. If someone went into the cabinet, it's considered forced entry and it's insurable if someone takes it. If I have it sitting on the top of a counter, not insured.
Right.
Interesting.
Knowing that information is important. So, you know, insurance companies paint this image that they're there to protect you and take care of you, and they really care about you. But if they can get out of paying a claim, boy, will they. So read your policy and know. Call your insurance broker and find out. Do you need a separate policy for your jewelry? Make sure you get a receipt, and make sure the receipt has a description of the item that you're buying. Now, it sounds ironic coming from us because some of you may have bought jewelry from us in Costa Rica, and sometimes it's like, wow, doing business like that at a 7-day event is really challenging. And so hound us for it and make sure you get it, and talk to your insurer and see what's required to put it on your insurance. Do they require a valuation? Do they just require a receipt? How does that work for them? I can suggest valuers in Australia and in the US for jewelry, but again, go with what you know. One pitfall that I've seen people come up against quite frequently is they'll buy something and then they'll turn around to a jeweler to get their valuation or opinion, and the jeweler says, "Oh, it's crap. It's worth nothing. It's just, you know, some old rocks and metal." Jewelers can be like gremlins and the most competitive little trolls you've ever met in your life. And their points of view very often is, if you didn't buy it from me, it's garbage. I don't want to see it. And it's funny to me because some of the people that have taken the Elegance of Living series, they'll come up to me and they'll show me a piece of jewelry that they've bought. And I can feel in their head, they go, "Oh, I didn't buy this from you. I just feel really bad." And I'm like, "No, it's great. Go. Take these tools and run and find great things at great value and enjoy." But jewelers can be crazy competitive. And again, if you ask them for evaluation and ask them for opinion, what most often they will give you is that fair market or forced sale evaluation, and they're not even registered as valuers. They're just giving you an opinion on their letterhead.
Right.
So know that. Is there any other questions coming in? How are we going?
Yeah. So Jennifer's asking, how long does an appraisal last, and would you need to reappraise every few years? And what is that? Can you talk to that?
Yes. Okay. So at this point, then, I'm going to show you a valuation based on an Australian valuation that I have here, and I'll show you a couple things that may answer that question. So let me just bear with me a moment while I open some screens here, and I'm going to show you. I've got so many little things open. Okay, here we go. I'll try to zoom it in. And then I go back to the thing. Sorry, I'm really like...
You're doing fabulous, Chris.
So I hit the share screen, and then I show you that thing I want to show you, and I say start. Okay, now does everyone see the
Yay!
I'm a bit like a kid. Every time I do it successfully, I'm just so delighted with myself. What do we got going on over here, though? Okay.
We're delighted with you right now.
Thank you. So here we have a valuation produced by Charles Rufus in Brisbane. He is, as it says here, he's a diamond merchant and a jewelry manufacturer and valuer. He is a registered valuer. He's a teacher at the Valuation College of Gemology and Jewelry Valuation. So that's, you know, those are his credentials that I know about. We've all been to school and know that credentials mean whatever, but you should have a valuation from a gemologist and valuer when you're talking about jewelry. Okay, so at the top here, on behalf of the Antique Guild, so this valuation was prepared on behalf of us. One thing you need to know about that: if your valuation is prepared on behalf of the jeweler, or the retailer that you bought it from, in the Antique Guild in this instance, if your item, God forbid, is lost or stolen, the insurer generally pays you out for replacement at the Antique Guild, not necessarily the jeweler of your choice. That's not always the case, but that's something to check with your insurer. So that's something I want you to know.
Chris, that actually brings up Katie's question. How do insurers pay out for pieces if they're irreplaceable? Would they pay cash? So yes. From what you just said, if you have that valuation that you're showing us there and it was considered irreplaceable, they would give you a credit at the Antique Guild? Is that what you were saying?
Yes. So what they'll do, Katie, is we'll skip to the bottom here, and you see we have estimated the articles in the above schedule, and in our opinion, the total of $25,650. So what the insurance company will generally do is say, okay, at a store like the Antique Guild, we can estimate that the retail price will be 15 to 20% below that amount. So we will pay out not $25,650, the total value, but we'll pay out $22,000. That's generally how it goes. Now, before I go into all the details of this, to answer Jen's question about how often you should necessarily value things, if you look at down here, that price is based on this date down here, the 22nd of May 2013, so about two years and a bit. And at that time, this was what gold was worth. This is what platinum was worth, which in this case is relevant because this is a platinum ring. And this is what the dollar was versus the US dollar. Now, if you want to dig into the math, you could go in and say, okay, well, if platinum at that time was worth 146 US dollars and we were almost on par at 98 cents, today, 1 Australian dollar is actually about 70 cents, I think, US dollars. This would be worth a whole lot more today based on that. So that is something to understand. Now, diamonds, the price of diamonds changes every Friday. Believe it or not, there is a report that goes out every Friday that if you're a diamond dealer or in the know or have signed up for it, you get this particular report stating what diamonds are worth. And it's all based on market reports of how diamonds have been performing. I can't remember the name of that report. It's like the RAB report or something like that. I'll look it up for you. If you're interested, get in touch. So if Jen or Katie have more questions about that, ask again. But that's what I'll say about that. I want to go through the rest of the valuation here. So here we have the detailed description of what it is. A cast platinum dress ring. It has a wide, round, tapered shank and flow-up shoulders. So that's just describing the item. And then it says here that each shoulder is set with a 0.25 tapered baguette cut G color VS Clarity diamond. Now the G color and VS Clarity, we went through all of that on the Elegance of Living Series 1. If you want to know more about diamonds and those grading charts, I suggest you go back and revisit that material. And then it goes on to talk about the 4-claw, so 1, 2, 3, 4, V-set collet contains 1 princess cut F color SI Clarity diamond. So again, talking about that. And based on that report that comes out every Friday, you can ascertain what a diamond with those specs is worth that week. And so there you go. And then here we have the total calculated diamond weight, 2 carat. Shank stamped platinum. So that's an indication that this is a platinum ring. Now, here we have all of the small talk. The valuation is prepared for the sole purpose of retail replacement for insurance purposes only in the Antique Guild single retail outlet in Brisbane. Values are not intended to set resale prices and is not to be used for setting resale prices. So that's all covering his backside, as I said. And even down here, there's all sorts of other fine print that you can do. And most of what that's doing is covering his business against liability if something unfortunate occurs. Now, valuers make mistakes. I had a ring not that long ago that a valuer in Brisbane, did that just go back to me?
It did.
Yes, it did.
Okay, good. So a valuer in Brisbane took this ring and he did an acid test on it. Now acid tests you can buy at, get them on eBay for about $5 to $10. And what it is you have a small metal, just a little metal plaque. And you take the item and you rub the metal on it so that it looks like it scratched it a little bit. Believe me, it's not damaged it. And then you have these different acids. And the acids you drip onto the metal strip. And if the acid is compatible with the metal, it will react and tell you that it's of the same caliber. So it'll tell you if it's platinum, it'll tell you if it's gold, it'll tell you if it's 14 versus 18, all those things. I think in the next series of the Elegance of Living, I'll actually bring one and show you how it works and use one. The valuer valued this ring and he called it platinum and set the price accordingly. Now, I had it in my store and called it platinum and priced it based on his valuation and all the rest of it. And the person who purchased the ring discovered that in fact it wasn't platinum. The valuer was incorrect. The person in that case who's liable is actually the retailer, not the valuer. There is recourse for me as the retailer to go to the valuer and say, hey, you got this wrong and I had to pay out and all these other things. But just be aware that those valuations sometimes are not totally correct and they're not set in stone either. But based on consumer law in Australia, you have recourse to go and say, hey, what you sold me is not what it is. I want my money back or I want this or whatever. You can come to an arrangement with that retailer. But just know that don't take it as gospel if it's written on a valuation.
Cool.
Let me just revisit. Okay.
So Katie's asking insurance again. So to
Yeah.
avoid being locked into a store credit scenario, what would the valuation be required to contain? Do they always only replace, or do they ever pay out sweet cash money?
Yeah, they do. They do pay out cash on valuations, based on, um, as I say, based on those things. I had an incident where I had 4 or 5 pieces of jewelry that I actually lost in a taxi. It was horrible. It was horrific. I had a small bag of pieces that I was taking to a fair, and decided not to show them, and took them back to my hotel room and left the small bag in the taxi. And um, based on the valuation, the insurer paid out cash on all those items. Based on the valuation, about 15% below the value, which was pretty extraordinary for them to do that. But it was proved that the taxi driver had to have found the bag and kept it, so he did keep it. Now, in Katie's case, what I would suggest is, you'd have to go to the valuer yourself instead of getting the evaluation from the retailer, and you'd have to have your name put on the valuation. That is generally the way it has to go. But that being said, get to know your policy and talk to your insurer and find out, because they may not require that. They may allow you whatever you like. I have had customers in the past who've had items lost or stolen, and they nominated to the insurer that they wanted their money to go to my store. Even though they didn't buy the things from me, they wanted the credit from the insurance to come to us. Now, I know that you'd rather have the cash. You need to make sure that your policy allows for that. It has not that much to do with the valuation. The reason why they'll often want to pay out to the store is because in a situation like ours, where you're dealing with estate or antique jewelry and you can't find an exact replacement, they'll just say, well, store credit is as close as we can come. And then your insurer pays out the retailer. So in our instances, we haven't done that to pull one over on customers and make sure if it's lost or stolen, they have to spend their money with us. We have no way of knowing who's going to buy the item. So we just insure it, or we not insure it, we just value it on behalf of us to give the customer an idea of what things are worth. Now, most valuers in Australia will charge you about $80 to $150 for evaluation. Now, that being said, in the US, for an insurance evaluation, you can expect to pay often $200 to $300. It can be much more expensive because, as I said, in the US, it's a totally unregulated industry. But if you find someone who that is their professional job and they're worth their salt, you will pay a little more for it.
So Patricia's now moved on to the other end of jewellery, from buying and owning and insuring to selling. Where is the best place to sell your jewellery besides the pawn shop, LOL?
Yeah, good question. This whole thing around price and value and selling is interesting. I mean, generally speaking, if you take your jewelry to someone with a shop like mine, an antique shop or a secondhand dealer, they obviously, I mean, I've had it so many times where someone comes in and they say, this ring has a valuation for $25,000, but I'll let you buy it for $23,000. And I'm like, I probably wouldn't be able to sell it for $23,000, so do you want me to buy it? Like, you need to understand that the people who are buying your jewelry that are in the market to resell need to make a profit too. And they probably have all sorts of things. Like, for me to run a credit card, it costs me a few percent, and then I have to pay 10% tax on the item. And then, so know that most of those retailers, they're not just being jerks. They need to make a profit to pay their staff and eat at night, and their business has expenses. Pawn shops are going to give you fair market value or below. So be aware of that if you go to a pawn shop. going to an auction house can be one way. But again, auction prices versus retail prices, there's sort of a wholesale to retail relationship there. Auctions usually won't give you a very high estimate either. They'll often give you very little. And once the item sells at auction, you need to pay the auctioneer 20% of whatever it took. Another option is you can take it to, again, an antique dealer or someone like me and ask them to sell it on your behalf. And they will offer you you'll get more for it generally because they'll put a retail price on it and take a cut of whatever it sells for, but it could take a long time. Who knows how long it's going to take for someone to come in and want that. It could be 6 hours and it could be 6 years. It's really hard to predict when someone's going to want that particular thing. You may find a scenario as well, Patricia, where instead of selling it, you can trade it with a secondhand dealer who has something you want, and he can, take the item of yours as a bit of a trade. That's a possibility. Of course, you can always do online things like eBay, or the other one here that's big is Gumtree in Australia. I know they don't have that probably in Saskatchewan where Patricia's from, but the thing with those is most people who are on eBay are looking for a deal. Do you know what I mean? They're not necessarily going to pay what the item is worth. They're there because they want to find what they want fairly cheap. So there's that. I'm trying to think of other avenues that you might sell it at. I mean, those are the main ones. The thing with most jewelry is there's the difference between buying it to sell it and buying it for you. And if you're buying it for you, they tend to be longer-term investments. They're not necessarily to be turned around and sold quickly and make a profit. But if you do know the industry and know what things are worth, that'll equip you to find deals that you can sell at a profit through any of those channels. Like, say, if someone brings you in a gold necklace, and you know that the gold in it, if you do the calculations, you could melt the gold and it's $3,000 worth of gold, and the seller's only interested in $3,200 or something. Great, buy it, because there's heaps of available profit in an item like that. But in terms of selling the pieces that you have, I would get them valued and then talk to a few people and see who gives you a good offer on them. So, yeah, I feel like Rebecca has something.
Yeah, no, I was just for my own fun doing a bit of a brainstorming on like a piece that I have, and I was wondering, the other part of selling to like an establishment or on a consignment would be making a deal that would be attractive to the person that is then going to sell on, wouldn't it? So yes. I wonder what kind of things you could start to look at if you did want to offer a piece to, say, someone like you, Chris. Like, what are the things that you, as the person with the piece of jewelry in your hand, could offer to make it a better deal for them?
Well, it really depends on the item. I never like to get people's hopes up too much, because sometimes people bring you these things and they're like, oh, it's been in my family forever, it's a treasure, I love it. And you look at it and you go, it's 9-karat gold with fake stones. What do you want? What do you really expect here from me? I guess for the most part, like, I'm always willing to take something on consignment if it's great. And sometimes I'm willing to do a trade, depending. What I guess is the most important thing is to approach the scenario with clarity of what you'd like to get out of it and what you're going to get back. I don't know if I can answer the question in terms of what makes it attractive, Rebecca, other than having something that they want.
Right.
Like
I was more looking at having a look at the store. Like, I have a ring that I would like to sell, but it's not really an antique guild piece. Like, I would look at what you have in the store, and it's not really a ring that suits your the style of what you're selling. And so I would rather find somewhere else that would be the kind of thing that they would that would be an amazing piece for them that they could sell on. So I was just more looking at like being selective about where you would choose to go and offer something and what you would look at as well.
Yeah, knowing what's valuable to different people is good. I mean, you're absolutely right. Some things people bring me and I just look at it and I go, look, I get it's valuable and it's so not appropriate for my store.
Right.
I wish you the best of luck, and I'll usually make suggestions to them of where it would fit. Find a shop that you think has the kind of thing you've got that would like it and be interested in it, and maybe approach them first and see. That's the other thing. I also wanted to touch on something. I know we've only got about 10 minutes left, but Jennifer, I'm assuming it's Jen Tooten, suggested, how often do you revalue your things? Follow the market is a big thing, and know what's going on. Say, for example, rubies right now are going absolutely through the roof because rubies mostly come from Burma, and there's a trade embargo to Burma, making it really hard to get them, and you can't bring them into the United States at all. As a result, not only have rubies gone through the roof, but spinel has gone through the roof. And spinel used to be considered the poor man's ruby, but it has that red color that is reminiscent of ruby. A good friend of mine had the foresight and the awareness to buy a big parcel of spinels a few years ago, and now they're worth 10 times what he paid for them. So, I mean, looking at your pieces and knowing, okay, A, has the dollar changed dramatically and the price of gold? Is that going to change the value of the piece based on when it was last done? Are there stones in it that are now way more valuable? Tanzanite, we've talked about in the past a lot, and we talked about it in Series 1. Tanzanite is becoming hard to get. I know I've said before that it's a few years away from you can't get them at all. I'm really hard pressed at the moment to find good ones. There was a lady that was telling me the other day that it used to be in Tanzania, in the mines, used to, you could leave the office and you could take a handful of them and walk away with tanzanites. And now it just doesn't happen. It's getting quite challenging to find real good ones that haven't been heat treated to enhance their color. And so know that as well. Know that if you have a great piece of tanzanite jewelry or a great piece of ruby jewelry, in another year or so, valuing them again, they're going to escalate in value like crazy. And that could be a good time to take them to someone to sell if you choose, and know that even though you're not going to get the full valuation if you sell it, you're going to probably do pretty well.
Cool.
Can everyone hear
that
the
gives
guy
me some
doing
information.
the weed trimming outside? A little bit, yeah. They always come on the morning I do the Elegance of Living. They decide to do the yard. I don't understand.
We don't hear a thing, Chris.
Oh, good.
Chris, Marilyn is asking, what is a chat ruby?
A chat ruby. Can you spell chat for me?
As in,
C-A-T-T.
yeah, as in we're chatting here. Yeah. As in talking, chat.
I've never come across that. I'm not actually sure what a chat ruby is. One thing you will see fairly frequently is PK ruby. And PK means that the surface of it is all rubbed. And it has lots of little sort of dots and spots on it. I've never heard of a chat ruby before. I'll have to look that up.
Cool.
I don't know everything. But I'm always willing to look for more information.
So, Chris, you've mentioned a number of times that in this about the Elegance of Living Series 1 that we had earlier in the year. And it was so amazing to me, the amount of information that you have and the amount of information you shared with us. It was like the value of the cost of the series was just so pitiful in comparison to like the manuals that you created and the amount of information that's in there that would contribute to anybody that's looking to work out values and things like that. And I'm so grateful for that series, and I'm really excited to hear more about the new series that's coming up in the new year. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the new series is building on the first series, and it's only available to people who did the first series, and it's going to go further into some of the topics that we discussed, and I'm going to send out a little bit of home play beforehand so that people refresh their memory of what was in the first series and use it. We're going to look at not just the basics of how to read hallmarks, but I'm going to give you some tricky ones to decode, and we're going to go into some more different kinds of stones, and just more in depth into all of the material. Because what's so exciting about this for me is there's something more to be learned every day about this. And recently, I did a jewelry show in Costa Rica at the 7-day event for Access Consciousness, and there was a fair few people that were on Series 1. And the questions that they were coming to me with about jewelry were so astute and informed, and they were really applying some of what they learned. It was really exciting for me.
Awesome.
So, look, I'm amazed that people come on these things and let me talk, but because I could go for an hour and a half about spoons if you wanted. I got some great one. But so that is happening in January, but also in December for anybody who's around in Queensland. We're doing an Elements of Elegance cocktail evening at the Antique Guild on December 4th, and people can come, and Rebecca Halse and I are going to be doing a bit of a class and talk, as well as looking at some of the pieces there in the guild and getting more information about them and what they have to offer and what they are.
So that's the evening before Facilitators starts on the 5th, is that correct?
Yes, December 4th. And anyone who's in Mooloolaba or up on the Sunshine Coast around that time, we're going to be arranging a shuttle down to Brisbane for the event.
Awesome, awesome.
I will be letting you know more information about that. I just realized it's not actually up on the website, but so expect a very delightful email invitation with all this information.
Very cool.
We'd definitely love to have you there. There's a very marvelous video actually that we created to invite you to this. And it just has all the energy of what we've been talking about here and more. I'm not sure if you've ever spent 5 minutes with Chris, but it's always a delightful conversation and you have no idea where it's really going to go. So imagine what an entire evening of this can create. I believe we're going to have a few little fun tests, like could you guess where to start with a dinner table, and talking about glossing over awkward conversations and forgetting people's names and anything that's to do with really creating elegance in your life. So I'm not sure if you've ever had any of those awkward moments, but I think we may be able to change a little bit there.
Exactly. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But thank you, everyone who came on the call this morning. It was fun for me, and I hope you learned something. If you have more questions, please feel free to email me personally at chris@theantiqueguild.com.au. But also on our website here, theeleganceofliving.com is a great place to go if you want to download some of the other free tasters that we've done, or find out more about the first series and the second series coming up in January.
Awesome.
But we'll have a different backdrop because my husband and I have just bought a house and we're moving.
Oh, exciting. Yay. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Chris. This has been a fabulous hour to spend with you. And as always, more information, and very, very grateful. The thank yous and the this was brilliant and that was awesome are all flooding in. We're still getting some questions coming in. Sorry, guys, time is up. But we will see you on another call. And thanks again, Chris. You're awesome.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.